Welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast. My name is Marcos Nogueira, and we are at the Azure Weekly Updates. With me, it's that beautiful face that you all know, all the world knows, Andrew Lowes. How are you, my friend?
I am doing really, really well today. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and chatting with you again. We
Absolutely.
had a couple of days off, let's say,
Yeah, a couple of the
and
episodes that you guys text me to see if everything is okay and everything else, and send me emails, and we appreciate the that feedback that you guys misses in this case from the last 2 weeks, but we are back. Nothing major. It's just basically busy agendas and some time off that we all deserve. So we decided to, instead of talking just for talking, we decided to just give you a break of 2 weeks, and we are coming back um,
absolutely.
with more content, with all of that. So first of all, thank you so much for being here. If this is your first time that you are arriving at our show, don't forget to subscribe. Oops.
Oh, I'm hiding the subscribe button.
Yes.
That's a pretty big
That
offense.
so
My
I
goodness.
will go another way. So don't forget to subscribe. Okay.
Wonderful.
Don't forget to smash that like button. And even if you don't smash like button, there is a button on beside it. That it's okay to smash it as well from time to time.
Yeah,
But
click the bell. That way, everybody will get a
yeah, I
notification,
always
right?
forget that. Click the bell, and then you get notification when we release this.
Mm.
Um, so this week we have to say that it was a pretty calm week on the Azure world.
It was.
Uh,
It was.
we
It was a
have
little on the quiet
It
side. Yeah.
was on the quiet side. I have to say, I agree with you 100%. Although it's more like, um, may we say it's a little bit on the security side, identity management side, kind of weak, right? With a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
would
good
agree.
things coming, and funny or not, it's always like that, right? We starting a new project, we getting a new project, and it's always coming these new features, and we always have the pleasure to work on those.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I think that we both really enjoy
Yeah.
is being able to explore the new features. And sometimes it's tough, right, in the
It is.
consulting world because we have to lead and educate our customers, right?
And learn at the
Um,
same time.
I was about to say, sometimes you're a little bit on the hot seat because they'll have a
Absolutely.
very good question. It's, you know what? That's a great question. I'm going to get back to you on that
Exactly.
one.
Just give me a few moments, so I can spill dial my friend, and we talk about it. And I will come back with you after the coffee.
It, it it has happened before. It
Oh,
will happen
oh,
again. Oh my
absolutely.
gosh. Yeah, I think
Uh,
it's going to be a good week. What do you think?
I think it's going to be an awesome week for that. I have no doubt on that. So it's not a. We hope. Okay, we always hope for the best. It's not going to be a long podcast, but it's going to be a good one because
You
we are
can't
not.
say those things.
We cannot say I know, but we don't care about quantity. We care about quality. So usually with the quantity of updates, we're going lower with the quality of the content. Usually, when we have less updates, we're going way deeper. Let's see how it goes because we did press the button of recording this podcast, and we
That's true.
only press it again when we finish. So let's roll. What do you think?
I'm ready. Let's give it.
Let's start it. So, welcome back, and let's start with the first update. The first update, it's not from this week, it's from the week before, but it's one of the things that we want to bring it because we didn't have the episode before or the last week episode. But this is one of the things that I challenge Andrew to bring it over. That is the VPN NAT is now in public preview. Okay, why is this important in your perspective, Andrew?
See, an interesting question. So VPN natting is really SNAT, right, or Secure Network Address Translation. And this is part of a well-rounded security solution wrapped around VPN connectivity that can be between two sites. It can be between a site and your Azure tenant. Could be between your private data center and another site. In any case, you really want to wrap as many layers as we can, right? So when we think about security, we're always talking about different layers, and each layer adds a little bit of protection. And if we also include monitoring and auditing and alerting kind of together with these layers, then what we get is a very robust security solution. We can build automations in with that. So part of all of that, the reason I explain so much is because we can get very technical very quickly with a lot of acronyms on the networking side when we talk about VPN natting. So really the important things that I like, and I did bring up the Microsoft Docs article on this one as well. And some of the things that I immediately have my eye drawn to, I should say, is the learned routes. So once a NAT rule is defined for the connection, the effective address space for that connection will change with the rule. So it becomes this dynamic tool that you can use as part of your configuration. And all you have to do is enable this on your Azure VPN gateway, right? And enable BGP route translation. And this is going to really reduce a lot of the overhead that traditionally, if address spaces are changing, dynamically assigned address spaces, right? This is going to help address a lot of the overhead for the networking team or the security team that was taking care of that. So it automatically adjusts. So that's kind of like, for me, kind of the wrapper of what we're getting. And the first feature my eye was really drawn to. I really like the BGP route translation. I think that's going to reduce a lot of work for administrators that have been kind of stuck doing those updates traditionally.
Absolutely. But for me, you mentioned that perfectly. But for me, this comes to help. And what I'm about to say, going to refresh your memory. One of the project that we did 2 years ago, right before this pandemic, okay, that was the reason that we brought into the project, is because they had overlap, in this case, subnets.
You betcha.
Okay, and this VPN NAT, okay, allows you now to have overlap subnets or overlap IP ranges in your configuration on your environment, because that was until now. Again, this is in preview, we have to say, but when it becomes GA, now it's allow you to just have those network overlap. So means that your network on premise, okay, can be the network that you have, for example, for the Azure as well. So you don't need to extend, and this is especially good, okay, for a lot of reasons. One of them is for those servers that we are migrating, and that inside of that VMs they are hard coded with IP ranges. Okay, with IP. It's not the best practice. It's not, but sometimes we encounter so many times on the thousands of VMs on workloads that we already migrate to the cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I'd actually just like to add, and I apologize for interrupting.
no,
I just want to add to that when we're talking about hard-coded IPs, we're not talking just about the VM layer. We're talking about applications, especially custom applications that have hard-coded IPs. Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of throw that one in there because I wanted people to really catch on to that.
Yeah, and it's not only that. It's like in organizations, like for example, I have one organization that I want to connect to your organization for some reason, right? And we might use exactly the same IP range. Now we can have this. The way that they are building this is very clever because BGP, right, is the way that everything we should do it because it's simple. It's way more manageable. The way that BGP works, it's announced all the routes and all of that to all of those things. If I'm not saying anything wrong, but what they have in this case is two rules. Okay, they have the static rule and they have the dynamic rule, and this is where I think it's really smart. Okay, because the starting rule is basically you have those fixed address mapping relationship, right? So, for example, if you have one of your and this happens a lot of time, if you have one of those offices that you have some IP range and they are okay and they are behind some kind of firewall and you want to connect in this case to those data centers or that Azure, you can have the static rule that they are stateless. So it means that they don't care. They don't care about what is the state of your connection. They basically we translate that network from what you have, right, to what is that you are transporting to Azure. So those are the static ones. The other one is dynamic. It's a little bit more complicated to set up, okay? But is the part that you have based on the availability of that IP based, you are in its state. So it basically knows what is coming from and where it's going to, right? And it's based on availability, and you can have different combinations of TCP ports, DDP ports, with all of that you have. So this is the part that's why for me, this is one of the things that I wanted to bring it because, man, what if this, I have to say, especially to you, Andrew, if this was released 2 or 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, we were not opportunity to work on that project.
Well, yes and no. That project had a lot of other technical challenges as well, let's say.
But the main one was this one, right?
It was the catalyst, right? It was the reason that we got engaged. And I'm glad we did. It was a pleasure to work with a lot of those folks, to be honest. And it's always a pleasure to work on a project together with you. Yeah. I always relish that opportunity, right? So just thinking about hot dogs and barbecues. Sorry. I catch up the opportunity as well. Yeah. But yeah, so it's already started. At least I waited till the end of the talk. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I really agree.
Let's put some mustard on the talk.
Exactly right. So I think the dynamic rule sets. Oh my gosh, this is going downhill so fast, folks. Can tell it's after a very busy, very long, stressful week for both of us. We're just ready to have some fun. But I will say the dynamic rules are going to be very powerful, and the ability to deal with APIPA addresses as well has been built in. And those are the non-routable addresses, right? So internally on the NAT, go and read this article if this is a challenge you're facing, is what we should probably say. Because there's a lot of very good technical detail in here. And as always, I want to say, the MS Doc does a really, really good job of communicating what's involved in this technical feature. And again, I'd also like to stress this is in preview, not appropriate at all in this case for a production environment. Far too big of a risk, I feel like, for production environments. So test it. And it's not that tough these days with modern switches, even at home. If you're using like a Unify switch or something, you can provision multiple networks and try it out between your home network and your cloud instance with Azure using the Azure VPN and see what happens. Try it out.
Absolutely.
Duplicate
And that's
it.
the idea is those scenarios that we talk about what's coming on this update, and we talk the scenarios that this update when becomes GA will enable. It's
It's going
now
to impact so many customers. Yeah, it's
it's
going to be
going to
great.
impact a lot of customers, and it's going to impact how we design, because usually we start our conversation, for example, when we design all of these architectures and all of these solutions, is what is your IP range, in this case architecture, because we need to define something new for Azure. And that is
So
always, especially on the big organization, is
yeah.
always a
Well,
problem.
one of the challenges I had, even I think I was talking with you about it in the winter time, was I was working on a project for a very large enterprise, and they had hundreds and hundreds of VLANs on-prem,
Yep.
and there was a lot of challenge trying to balance on-prem versus cloud, because by the time we provision out all the different subnets, it does not take long in a large enterprise to run out of networks.
Absolutely.
So yeah, anyways. Now I have a question, and I'm kind of hoping that a lot of other people are thinking this too. And you're going to think that, Andrew, that's a really newbie kind of a question, but I'm going to ask it anyways because it's on my mind. So, with this big change to network architecture impact that this VPN SNATing can have, does the well-architected framework documentation get updated aligned with this change? And what's the normal delay on that update?
Absolutely. Usually they don't do this, as far as I know, they don't do this on the preview. They come with the GA, and I don't think it's going. So this doesn't change much, okay? On the well frame architecture, at least in my point of view.
I agree, but what I'm thinking of is the robustness, right? So initially, the recommendation has been that we don't overlap networks, and that might continue to be the recommendation. But the reality is that we often, if allowed, companies will absolutely overlap networks, right?
Yeah.
So I think I was just wondering about that, and I'll keep an eye on it, and maybe I'll make a note and I'll see if we can update our audience as well. But
No,
I was curious about that.
absolutely. It's not, again, it's not best practice even on internal to do that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's doable. It is there. They are just and I'm almost sure that this VPN NAT, it's basically one of those that the community ask for it, because there must be so many situations and scenarios that they need it, and now they are implementing, right. But again, it on the big organizations, it's too much work. You're starting to put, it's not the problem of the work, it's the complexity of having another NAT rules, and to troubleshoot that, my friend, is going to be a challenge, because now you have IPs that they are overlap, where it's coming from that or not. So you need to really design your solution really well, really going into this detail level that we talk about it, to be able to implement these on the correct way without any issues, right? Because you are adding complexity with NAT. Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and maybe the I think the last piece of advice, I think, let's say, that I want to leave with our viewers and listeners is when you're enabling that on any cloud network, please make sure that you've enabled packet monitoring and logging, and that you have it configured so that you can turn it on very easily, and that it has like a smaller retention
Yeah.
so that you can do captures in an ongoing basis to do troubleshooting on demand. It's really, you would do the same thing on-prem with your equipment for NATing, for firewalling. So do the same thing in your public cloud.
Absolutely. And with all of this, for example, and now that you mentioned this, I'm just thinking on governance about this is now you need to revisit probably your naming convention for NSGs, because if you are one of those persons that, or one of those organizations that you put, for example, the IP range on the name of your NSG, guess what? You can repeat those. What are you going to implement those? So a lot of those type of things is going to happen, and this is just an example that just came to my mind. So it needs to be well thought. It needs to be well well designed, well solution, so you are not suffering any type of those. Because guess if you are using even the same NSG and you're changing a port, guess what? You are changing a port for all of the NSGs that is being applied in this case for that particular one, right? If you change those. So it's
never as easy as it seems on the
no,
surface, is it?
it's never easy. It's a good update because it
It's awesome.
embrace even more scenarios that we encounter in on our projects and our daily tasks that we are doing on Azure. Makes a little bit more openness, let's call it this way, the part of the cloud. So it's not that restricted that you need to do all of those type of things, but all of that comes with the price tag, right? The price tag we cannot see right now, but it's going to be the price tag of maintaining, troubleshooting, and make it work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Upgrades always have that hidden cost underneath them. So really cool. Sorry to take up extra time. I know you said at the start it's going to be quick. So 30 minutes to the end of our first update. Just FYI.
That's okay. Let's move to the next one. That is Azure AD Privilege Identity Management integration with Azure Lighthouse is now in public preview. This is huge, okay? Especially in our work. This is huge. Having the Azure AD PIM, in this case, integrated with Azure Lighthouse, that promotes what is the module that we should always go forward, that is the zero trust. First of all, I would like to go on a few concepts over here before we start going on these updates. The zero trust model, okay, is a security model that is well embraced in the cloud, that you don't trust any machine, you don't trust any workload, even if you are coming from on-prem to your express route or to your VPN, you don't trust it. So you need to protect what you have on the cloud. Basically, that is what the zero trust in a very few words model is all about. Okay. The other thing is, before we go into this, is Azure Lighthouse. Azure Lighthouse is an awesome service that you have for organizations that they have multiple, in this case, that they have managed service providers, for example, to just monitor or to just work with, in this case, the customer or with their customers. Okay.
Yeah, multiple customers.
Multiple customers. So basically, you have your Azure Lighthouse that it's a native management tool that allows those service providers, the CSPs usually, to efficient build and deliver security and manage service to every single customer by using this service. And the Azure AD PIM is the part in that you can have the integration of the privilege accounts. So basically, you don't need anymore those admin accounts that you usually have on-premise, because on-premise, the best practice is that you should have your normal account, and then you should have an admin account to do all of those elevated privilege accounts. On the cloud with PIM, you don't need anymore.
That's
So
correct.
so
Yeah.
basically, the best practice is you use your account when you need it. You go into this service, the Azure AD PIM, right? And you will elevate yourself to the group or to the elevated privilege that you require to perform that task. Okay. After that, usually it's a time bomb, so can be by minutes to 24 hours.
You
Um,
made that sound very exciting for a moment there.
yes, I hope that by mentioning that bomb word that I mentioned again, we will not get kind of issues with those three letters down on
So
south of the border.
no talking about PIM while you're in an airport. Let's make that rule.
Sure, or even
Just in
bomb.
case.
If you don't want to have any problem, don't listen this podcast while you are passing the security part, because
Use your headphones, folks, please.
I think I repeat bomb too many times.
Yeah, you might have that one flagged for review on the YouTube upload now, but that's okay. Please validate you're not any crazier than any other regular day.
Exactly.
See, we should write all those prompts. But you're absolutely right though. So Lighthouse integration is really for Azure partners, Azure CSPs and MSPs, managed service providers, cloud service providers, all these different kind of affiliations with Azure and Microsoft, right? And I use it on a fairly regular basis, actually. I definitely use PIM quite a lot. Many of my clients now have PIM. Otherwise, sometimes I come in to put PIM in for them. So fairly familiar with it. But one of the really cool things is that we've been introduced to Lighthouse kind of on the technical side for a couple of years already, right? Like it's, I don't remember exactly when it came out and when I started using it, but it's been very exciting. And combining the tools together, let's say the Azure services together, Azure Arc and Azure Lighthouse, add in Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management, the PIM, it becomes very, very powerful for allowing vendors, subcontractors, even just remote workers from other companies to be able to have access to your environment, but you still have very tight controls and logging over it. So it's a really good way to bridge gaps and allow even temporary access with Lighthouse, even, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that accounts are properly protected with PIM. Enforce things like MFA is a good example, right? I always think of like the low-hanging fruit. What are the easy things to target? Definitely multi-factor authentication. Yeah, so I think this update for me at least is really exciting because it starts to kind of bring all of these things together a little bit better. With PIM integrated now with Lighthouse, we can start to layer those technologies. Notice I'm really doing a little bit of tie-in there. So layering these different technologies together with PIM and Arc and Lighthouse, you really start to see how the suite of products is going to be able to make life easier for our customers, right?
And it's not only that, right? It's like usually when you if you are experienced with having a managed service or a cloud service provider, usually you have high privileged accounts, right? And be
Mm-hmm.
able to integrate those, it's like, imagine the scenario that I like about this is security for the customer, because uh, you are the managed service, you have the knowledge, right, of maintaining that service depending on what is your relationship, but theoretically you are the SME, right, and the customer is just using the Azure for that. So, and be able to kind of a bad person to with bad intentions to try to access that on the client side is like, I have this third party that is managing, they have access, usually a lot of access on this, And with PIM, you can put what's called the approval process,
Yes.
okay, in place. So means that when you are trying to elevate yourself to those very high level, for example, global admin or something like that, okay, or owner of the subscription and something like that, that you need to create whatever it is that you need to do it, you can implement a process that you can have a control by default on, even if that CSP or MSP, like you mentioned, is coming into your environment. So it's not like, oh, now because they have access, they can do whatever they want to do it, and they can enable service and disable services and delete service and create service, whatever it is. Now you can have a little bit more your level of security of your environment, that you are adding PIM, okay, to the Lighthouse, that allows you, for example, your those partnership that they are very helpful because they have all of that technical knowledge, they have all of that experience to just helping you be more successful and be more productive on the Azure world. This
Yep,
is where I
absolutely.
see this PIM integration be very helpful, because it will help to control all of those, right? To help another level of security and confidence on the customer level to have all of those services.
Absolutely, yeah, you're spot on. The elevation of privilege and the approval process, it really should go hand in hand when you're building your design and you're doing your implementation and you're working through those things.
Yeah.
Trying those out is really a really cool experience I've
It
found
is.
for a lot of people. If it's new, the approval process, I should say, if the approval process is new, then it can really be a very exciting way to reduce risk overall,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Besides that, you have the log trail that PIM gives you, right? So
Absolutely.
so
Very
it's
detailed.
very detailed and all of that. So it's a very nice way to see that PIM, their integration, the PIM with Lighthouse and all of that.
Mhm.
Moving on to the other update, a little bit more geeky, at least for us, is the virtual machine level disk bursting is now in GA on more VM types. So I do
Mhm.
remember this, okay, this update coming to preview and now is in GA. So this means that all of those VMs, that is the DSV4, DASV4, DDDSV4, ESV4, and whatever it is
There's
more.
so many.
There are so
And
many.
how much does it cost?
How much does it cost? Like what?
This bursting. I just want to
Nothing.
say it's free,
It's free. So no
right?
additional cost is associated with this. So what is this helping? And it's on the post, is in these scenarios. First of all, improves, that for me is the most important one, the boot time process, the boot time.
Oh my gosh,
By
yes.
that, it's just already a win. With that
I
extra
I want to
cost,
say it feels like it cut it in half.
yeah, like it's way faster. And I have to say that even on Windows, right, on Windows client, right now, not the Windows 11 but Windows 10, man, I build a new VM, and the new version, the latest version, you click on the start menu, and it's I think it's faster than an iPad, to be very honest. I
I think you
was
might be
I
right. Now you
was in
have a
this
pretty
case.
beefy system though that you've built,
Yes,
right? Like
yes.
lots of RAM and a very good processor.
Yes,
And
I have to say that. But even compared with my MacBook Pro, it's like insanely fast, because on my MacBook Pro I can turn it on. Okay, it comes very fast on the login process. Yes,
mhm.
it does. Not as fast as Windows 10, I have to say. They are about the same specs. Okay, but my God, I was not expecting that, because you know that usually you press the power button, right? And then you have a few seconds like, oh, let me do this,
Yep.
and like watching or turning around to grab something, say, is already on? No, cannot be. Did I turn it off? So I turn it off again, right? And I press again because I could not believe it how fast it was. Again, just to give it parenthesis, this is exactly the same. Turning on those boot times on the virtual machines, guys, it's going to be insanely fast for free.
Okay.
The other two
You
things,
just have to enable it.
just you have to enable it. The other thing is for batch jobs. And we know this a lot of times because we mentioned this a lot of times. When you're doing batch jobs, that some applications you're doing some kind of those analysis that you need a higher performance. Usually, I've been dealing with this to just shut down the VM, resize the VMs just to be able to do that, so I can have that burst of performance that I need for that. Right now, I don't. It's if you are using those VMs that they are pretty basic, even the FS series, the V2, it's pretty basic. You have this enabled. You just need to enable. And the other one is for traffic spikes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have traffic spikes that you are unforeseen on a lot of those circumstances, right? It's there for you, especially on web servers, especially on all of that. They are really tweaking on this level of detail Azure and their infrastructure. That's the part that I said that this is a 2 gig of that, right?
It is, and I love the graphics that they've used in the MS Doc for this. I wanted to call that out because they try to visualize this. I always talk about like a bucket and how full it is, and we talk about the water level, and that's exactly what they've done. So they've shown the bursting bucket, and capacity is max burst for the duration at the max burst rate. And you start out with your bucket full, and as you use out of the credits out of your bucket, it runs out and it takes time to fill back up again, right? So you can't run bursting constantly.
No.
You run out, your bucket runs out, but it takes time, it fills up. So if you're doing batch processing, 2 or 3 times overnight or something like that in bursts, then this is really going to support that kind of a model quite well.
Absolutely. And that's the part that I like about this. Again, this reminds me, you like this bursting bucket, but I always think this about the level, the cache that, for example, the photography machines have. Like you have, like, for example, and I see a lot of those. If you are related with photography like me as well, you have like you press the button and you have like 20 shots per second, and then you have like 100 and some of machines they have like 20 photos that they can deal until they are starting recording those, not recording, starting to save those on the cards. They have that buffer. That's what I call this. This is the buffer of the bursting that you need for IOPS to fill it up, right? So it's pretty cool to have that right now on the VMs, and they are doing, and this is GA, so it's available now, and you can use this right now without any additional cost. Although you have to enable. That's the only thing. By default, it's not enabled. And it makes totally sense because now if you enable this by default, probably we are using without any intention, and it's not for all the workloads that you want these bursts, right?
You really only want it on the data disks whenever possible, right?
Absolutely. Moving to the next one, and I will give you the honors of presenting this.
Yeah, just because it rolls right off the tongue, right?
Absolutely.
So, public preview of the OWASP ModSecurity Core Rule Set 3.2 for Azure Web Application Firewall. So we talk affectionately about our WAF systems, web app firewalls. This is the public preview of, okay, I'm going to go for it here, the Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP, ModSecurity Core Rule Set 3.2 or CRS 3.2 for Azure Web Application Firewall deployments running on App Gateway.
Yes. So again, it's really good to see that the open support, in this case, the open web project, the open web security project, it's coming to this. And again, rules that you can create, that you can enable, that you can do it on the web application firewall. It's really good to do it. So in this case, what protects you, for example, is some of those uh, like massive SQL injection attacks,
Oh, yes.
cross-site scripting attacks, HTTP protocol violations, bots, crawlers, scanners, all of that. So it's so simple to do it. It's in public preview, all right, for these core rules. Basically, what you need to do that is to add those, enable those, and that's it. And you
Yep,
are set to go.
absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot of big security improvements, right? So they've reduced the number of vulnerabilities so that really they've
Yes.
patched and addressed some vulnerabilities, which is great. Reducing the number of false positives.
Yeah.
And also increasing performance. So really this is everything in an update that we kind of have come to expect from Microsoft, right? Fixes and improvements rolled into one, as well as I really like that they're doing this in the preview. They're rolling it out kind of softly, let's say, so that we have a chance to test this in our dev and test subscriptions first before we go to prod.
Absolutely. And it's really critical for those applications that you have the firewall. Although the WAF, that is the web application firewall, it's not the normal firewall. It's a firewall dedicated, in this case, or more, let's say, customize it for web interface. Okay.
That's correct.
So it doesn't mean that if you enable this, okay, you are replacing your firewall. No, this is
an enhancement.
an enhancement. Yes. So you can have another layer of security to control even more your web content or your web servers in front or in the back of your general firewall. Okay. So this is the way that I just want to mention that, because I had this conversation this week with one of my colleagues that the WAF, why are you having WAF and firewall at your diagram? And this is the reason why. I just remember that comes to my mind right now, and I think it's important to just reiterate that part, because it doesn't surpass the Azure firewall, doesn't replace, but is an additional one that you can have it, right?
Yeah, that's a really important note, right? So we're not replacing, we're adding layers. And if I may be so bold, I think we may have found a second theme for this week's updates is layers of security.
Yes, layers of security.
I did not really realize that at the start, but as we've been talking through some of these, and it's not always obvious.
No, it's not.
You know, when we start talking, sometimes we, like you say, the lower the number, the deeper the discussion, right? So
yes,
layers of conversation.
Oh my God, this is the Layers podcast episode.
Well,
say Layers episode or episode of
Layers episode. Yes, welcome to the Layers podcast and the Layers episode number 17.
Exactly. Moving to the next layer, or sorry, to the next update.
You're terrible. I love it.
General availability of transition to cloud service extends support with the new migration tool. It's now in GA. And I really remember this. It was a few months back, I have to say, that we talk about this, because there is, in particular, the name. So they kept the name the same. So you have cloud services, okay, to deploy to the cloud services, but in parentheses, extended support. So this extended support, it's now for the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager. So all your migration, it's now fully orchestrated, okay, to move entire deployments that you have to the ARM portal, to the ARM configuration. So this is, I think, is the last effort that Microsoft is doing for you to move from the classic one, which means on ASM, to the ARM to finally get rid of those ASM modules and ASM workloads.
Yeah, and I think they've done a really good job here of highlighting that this is extended support.
Yeah.
And I think this is the second extension, if I'm remembering our last conversation a little bit, because maybe this is just the next piece, right? But it's really important to note that this is deprecated, right? So the old method, it's eventually going to have to be decommissioned at some point. They'll have to turn it off, and we move towards ARM, right?
Yeah. So and this is built, for example, to just if you are new to the podcast, right? Or if you are already but you didn't see that episode, um, this is basically to move, for example, if you have those classic VMs, okay, to move to the VMs to what is the normal. So you cannot create new classic VMs anymore. But if you already have those VMs that they are still running and you still want to move it, and there was a lot of issues before of moving, right? Those classic workloads to the what's called the ARM, to the ARM portal, or not the portal, to the ARM as ARM resource. Let's call it this way, right? Because there are a lot of differences. There are a lot of dependencies. There are lots of parameters that you have on ARM if you are comparing with the version 1. So I always like to call the ASM the version 1 of Azure and the ARM on the version 2 of Azure. So if you are still running all of those workloads, especially VMs, that you are using the version 1, this tool will allow you to migrate those, okay, providing you with the test migration that you needed, okay. That is fundamental because you should not go then blinding say next, 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 finish. It's not that the idea is to test that, and basically it goes on three fundamental steps. It validates, okay, first of all, your workload, okay, and does that by testing it. It prepares your workload because there are a few changes that you need to do it, okay, on the workload for you, and at the end it will commit or abort, depending on where you are, your workload. So it kind of sets you up for success by preparing your workload on or validating all of the things that you need to address, right? So if there are some incompatibilities, you need to address on those. But if you aren't, at least you get a nice report. You get a nice way to say, yes, that workload it's ready. It prepares your workload for that migration, right? And then finalize that so it deletes the other one or aborts if anything uh, uh, gone gone wrong and you need to roll back. So again, all of this, it's pretty amazing what they are trying to do, to just try to move all of those platform orchestrated migration on your existing cloud services. And usually it's where it's critical, right? It's where because changing a lot of those type of things, it's massive. I remember one of my recent project I did last year, for example, that I was migrating a very mainframe big project to microservices. On the paper, it's absolutely amazing getting rid of one of the most used and sturdiest and stable platforms that is the mainframe, right? But very old, very rudimentary. You cannot go scale on that and all of that to a microservice that is where everyone should go right now. That is the new architecture of everything that you should do, right? Um, but it's not a simple way that you have like you press the magic button and now you get rid of your mainframe and you're moving to microservice. It's not. It's a journey. You have to
It's
slice down, and you have to probably go into a a, a middle layer. I will say tier, but now we are on a layer podcast. We have to say layers. On the middle layer, to move to the top layer, that is the microservices, right? For example, and yeah, and those type of things with this migration tool will help you. And I know that I've been speaking a lot. So do you want to add anything, Andrew? If I didn't say
actually
anything?
no. I maybe if anything, I just want to highlight. I think what you were talking about when you were speaking to the journey, that there is no magic button that we can press. There's no one size fits all migration tool. That it's a journey. That even though all of these tools, all of the people that work on these tools, everything is really well done. It's well packaged and it's very usable, but there's always one system that won't work with them. And we have to always just plan carefully. In fact, this morning I was talking in a workshop with a client and saying, the methodology that I really follow when it comes to migrating complex systems is prepare, prepare, prepare. Is there anything else to the recipe? No, nothing. We just have to do a lot of preparation. It's a journey. It takes some time. We have to be thoughtful when we build these migrations, and especially when we take a system like a mainframe and we break it down to microservices. It takes a lot of planning and preparation to do that. So yeah, they're very fun, they're very exciting projects to work on, but they also can be complex. So I guess that's maybe the fun part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the next one, it's not an update. We already talked about that on the update, but it's the blog post that talks about this PIM with Azure Lighthouse that enables zero trust. So it's way more. It talks about with the different types of scenarios, especially with the way that you want to protect your environment, right? And you have all of these third parties that they are your service providers, or in this case your managed service provider or the cloud service provider network, and how you can basically protect from even from ransomware, because no one is is how I can say is not totally free of getting compromised with ransomware. Even the cloud providers or the managed providers, solution providers, they can be hit by a ransomware, or even the customer, right? Um,
Absolutely.
the customer can imagine this: the customer gets ransomware, gets into the managed service provider, and now the managed service providers just go to the other one. So it's really careful for both sides. And by using the least privilege access, and I think this zero trust, it's what it does. It makes the zero trust with least privilege access available, and moving to that journey enables this. That's what we want to bring once again on this podcast, because I think it's the part that we want to bring it.
Absolutely, right. And just in time access is a big part of PIM,
Yes.
like we were talking about a little earlier. That's the process of having approvals for elevated privileges, and it allows us to consolidate accounts. We don't have to have separated accounts in cloud. It also allows easy integration, maybe not the right word, easier integration with vendors. So in the case of MSP, the MSP can use their Azure AD account to integrate through Lighthouse to your tenant, and using PIM, approve just-in-time credentials for that vendor to access your systems. Yeah. So it's a really good way to help support zero trust model coming in. And like you're saying, it really reduces risk. It eliminates the need for vendors and customers to really integrate using a VPN or something like that, where the risk of moving a compromised system or a virus across that VPN connection is increased. So Lighthouse really reduces that risk quite significantly.
Yeah. And the PIM, you don't need to. So one of the things that I'm just thinking right now that might create some kind of not confusion, but some kind of doubt is you don't implement PIM only because of the Lighthouse, because of your service provider, either if it's managed or the cloud service provider. You do that because you want to implement PIM across the board, across your organization. So, and that is the part that it's really important to revisit this concept of the PIM, because it's the way that you're protecting yourself. Okay. Again, we are just extending that integration to Lighthouse, so you don't need to give the keys of the kingdom, okay, to another organization that it makes you uncomfortable. So this allows you to just take that barrier, in this case not barrier, but the barrier down, because now you have another set of controls for that type of situations. Of course that you have way more controls, like you mentioned, the just in time, the JIT, it's another one. So the just in time allows you to just going on that particular resource, a VM, for example, that you are enable, in this case, RDP, that usually should be disabled. You are enable RDP even if you are using Bastion service or not. You are enable just in time access to that type of resource. And again, it's coming with a time period, a limited time period that you can do. I didn't use the word bomb. Okay.
It's not even an explosive description. That's terrible.
Okay. I think where we're going, I think we have to cease, in this case, this this podcast, because we are getting too
I think
far
that's a
away.
very good idea. Let's just keep moving on.
Let's keep moving on. So the next one is next one. The next one is to thank you, Andrew, in this case.
I was going to say, I think I miscounted earlier that.
To thank you, and to thank you, in this case, that you arrived to this madness of layers of podcast, the podcast of layers, or the layers of podcast, whatever you want to decide it. It's just semantics. To just thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for being here. And don't forget once again to smash that like button, ring the bell, not ring the bell, press the bell, so you can get more notification, and subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to our podcast. It's very fun, as you can already see. And once again, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate being here. And as always, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. You and each and every one of you are the reason we do this. So thank you.
Absolutely. So see you next week, and bye for now.